So this is the Galaxy S21 Ultra, a big, beautiful phone that Samsung announced just about a month ago, and I wanted to let the dust settle with this phone for a little bit. I wanted to use it for an extended amount of time after the launch date to see whether this phone really lived up to that Ultra tagline. And so here we are, a month after the release of this phone, after a number of software updates, and spoiler alert, it's a very, very good phone. What makes it so good? Well, let's talk about it. So starting with the build quality and design, and once again, Samsung proves they have what it takes to craft a premium device, and they just seem to be getting better and better with each new phone that they release. Unlike the glossy finishes from last year's S20 lineup, the S21 Ultra moves to the matte glass finish on the back, which not only feels fantastic in the hand, but it also helps to keep fingerprints to a minimum. Now, I will say, I think I still prefer the feel of the Note 20 Ultra. It somehow felt even more premium than this phone in the hand, but the S21 Ultra still feels really nice. Now, keep in mind, this phone is hefty. There is a fair amount of weight to it, and it's not compact in any which way. And I think part of that comes down to the huge camera unit on the back of the phone. Instead of just protruding at the back, like most phones, it now flows around and onto the side of the phone. And whilst I don't mind the look that this gives visually, I actually do think it adds to the hefty feeling in the hand. Samsung also continues in the right direction with their display as well, again becoming ever so slightly less curved compared to last year's lineup, which was already less curved than the previous year. And I have to say, I've noticed no issues with palm rejection this year at all. So even whilst I still prefer the look and feel of a completely flat display, functionally, the curves on the S21 Ultra have had no downside whatsoever. Oh, and whilst we're chatting about the display, look, no surprises here. Year in, year out, Samsung always puts out fantastic displays, and this one is no different. Really vivid, really bright, and you can also now set the screen resolution to WQHD+ with 120Hz enabled at the same time, which is the first Samsung phone to let us do so. But I will just quickly say, I don't know if this is just me, but it does feel as though Samsung's 120Hz is not quite as silky smooth as other phones that I've used with a 120Hz display. I can't really put my finger on what it is exactly. Maybe it's just the animations used in the software. Maybe it's something to do with the touch sampling rate, although it is supposedly 240Hz, which is top of the line. But whatever it is, it doesn't feel quite as buttery as the OnePlus 8T I was using prior. And dare I say, even the OnePlus Nord, which only has a 90Hz panel. Definitely something to consider. Now, along with the build quality, the haptic motor used in the S20 Ultra is really solid, pretty much on par with the Note 20 Ultras from last year, and far better than what we had in last year's S20 lineup. And this is something that makes me very happy. And the fingerprint sensor feels much better than last year's lineup as well. Now, I've been the biggest naysayer of in-display fingerprint sensors for the longest time, but 2021 seems to be the year that has started turning things around for me. I can definitely tell that the time required to keep my finger on the sensor before it unlocks is shorter than previous offerings from Samsung. And as I mentioned in my review of the OnePlus 8T, if you enroll your main finger twice, it seems to have a noticeable impact on the success rate of the scanner. I just wish Samsung would let us register more than 4 fingerprints in total, because if we're doing 2 for the main finger, that only leaves enough space for 2 other fingers, which ain't enough in my book. Now, speaking of software, this is perhaps what I was most intrigued about coming into using this phone. If you watched my review of the S20 FE a little while ago, you will know that my biggest complaint about that phone was the seemingly lack of optimization of the software experience. My conclusion in that video was that it seemed as though Samsung was reserving all of that good software optimization for only its proper high-end flagships, and that it felt like they were just slapping a universal version of their software on their cheaper devices. And so when I started using the S21 Ultra, I was interested to see whether my theory held up. And the answer is, yeah, it kind of did. Things like the always on display having this nice animation in and out of the lock screen, or the fact that the 120Hz display actually feels like a fast refresh rate display all the time, and even just the overall fluidity of the phone feels much more refined compared to the experience that I had with the S20 FE. And keep in mind, the S21 Ultra unit I have is the Exynos version, and the S20 FE unit I have is the Snapdragon version. So this isn't an Exynos versus Snapdragon issue. This, in my mind, is a simple case of the software being optimized on one device versus it not being optimized on another. So what this means is that the S21 Ultra has a really sleek software experience. One UI 3.1 is a pretty solid version of the classic Samsung skin, and whilst it's still not my personal flavor of choice and probably never will be, the great news is that with the way Samsung has implemented their gestural navigation, you can kind of use third-party launchers and gestures at the same time without the experience becoming a hot mess. In fact, I've been using the new Nova Launcher 7 build for the entire time that I've been using and reviewing this phone, and it's been pretty close to great. Not flawless, but definitely a solid enough experience. Because even though I love the fact that Samsung has, for some reason, added the Google Discover page to their own launcher now, I still really can't stand the look of those awful icons and the design of the app drawer as well. So the fact that I can slap a third-party launcher on and still enjoy the software experience, well, that's a big thumbs up from me. Now, one thing I will say that hasn't impressed me all that much has been the battery life. And this is probably more so an issue with the Exynos version of this phone rather than the Snapdragon version. But with light to medium use, I'm getting to the end of the day with around 30 to 50% of battery left, which doesn't sound that bad, but only around 2.5 hours of screen on time. And then with heavy use, I'm struggling to get even up to 5 hours of screen on time, even though this phone has a 5,000 milliamp hour cell. Now, it has admittedly gotten slightly better over time, so that must be the adaptive battery coming into play. But for an ultra premium flagship like the S21 Ultra, and considering how beefy this phone is in the hand, I feel a little ripped off with the battery life I've experienced so far. And so finally, it's the cameras, and I have really enjoyed using the cameras on the S21 Ultra, a lot more than I did the cameras on the S20 Plus from last year. I think my favorite improvement over last year's S20 lineup is how photos of people look, whether portrait mode or not. They just look much punchier and crisper with less of that washed out, gross look that I experienced in way too many photos last year. Aside from photos of people, everything else is business as usual. Great colors and great clarity straight out of the camera. And I really like that we have both the 3x and 10x telephoto lenses on the back, which results in quality photos regardless of whether you're capturing medium level zoom shots or long distance zoom shots. I really like the principle with this option of going with 2 telephoto lenses instead of just one 10x telephoto lens. Video quality is also really nice, and whilst there are some fun new video features like director's view and so forth, to be honest, I haven't used them. But I have captured lots of videos on this phone, particularly of my kids, and I'm always really happy with the end results. Okay, time to wrap this thing up. This is a great phone, and it's actually even cheaper at launch than what the S20 Plus was last year at launch, which makes it an even more appealing option. However, as I predicted in my review of the Note 20 Ultra, that phone has come down in price significantly since its launch, and I can find it brand new online for only $100 more than the S21 Ultra. If it was my money, I'd actually go for the Note 20 Ultra. Yes, it's a slightly older processor, but you get proper S Pen support, as in an actual S Pen built in. You get an even more premium design, in my opinion, and cameras that are potentially even just a little better than the ones on this phone. I mean, both phones are excellent and you'd be happy either way, but the Note 20 Ultra was just in its own league. And at the price it's at now, I think it's even better value for money than the S21 Ultra. But hey, that's just my view. With that said, I'm gonna keep testing out this theory of mine that Samsung is cutting costs with their cheaper phones by not spending as much money on software optimization. I've got the S21 coming very soon, which should be an interesting test given its price point, and I'll definitely keep you updated. But for now, that's it. The S21 Ultra is a really nice improvement compared to last year's iteration, and whether you get this or the Note 20 Ultra, I think you're gonna be a very happy camper.